But let me make something perfectly clear.
I too really want to be clear in this video and talk to you about the focusing aspect of the Nikon P950. And by the way, this video also applies to the P1000 as well, since they are very similar. You know, it's important because a challenge for a super zoom camera is the focus. It's wonderful to have that great zoom, but your shot's going to be ruined if it's out of focus. There's nothing you can do about it later. The Nikon's focus system, while it does an okay job sometimes, is not the most high-tech. It uses a contrast detect system, which is not as snappy or as high-tech as the state-of-the-art phase detect system, which most mirrorless cameras use today. But in this video, I'm going to try to help you get through this and get the best out of both the autofocus, how to use the manual focus, which, believe me, you're going to need to know about. I'm going to show you the different focusing modes, along with some tips, tricks to get the best looking in-focus photos and videos possible with the Nikon P950 P1000. Now, this is part of my tutorial series on the camera. I have a few other videos focusing on, pun intended, videos on the zoom, scene modes, menus and controls, whether you're a beginner or a more seasoned user, and whether you own the camera or are interested in buying it, these videos might very well serve you. So at the bottom of the control wheel of the camera, you'll see a little flower icon, and that cycles you between three modes: autofocus, a flower, and a mountain. And the mountain is for, well, things in the distance that's going to be focused around infinity. And the flower is for flowers or anything really close to the lens. But normally you're going to leave this on autofocus, and we're going to use the focus in the menus to really control things. So this is what intimidates people the most, is the autofocus area mode, because it's kind of confusing and there's a lot of different choices. So let's go through them one by one. Now, face priority, the top selection, is the mode that I typically use. Autofocus is engaged, but the camera will look for a face, and if it finds one, it'll put that as a priority, put a box around it, and focus on it. As you can see, it does with mine. It didn't do it with the original dummy, but the camera senses this dummy as a human, puts the box around the face, and it will focus on the face. Now, sometimes you may want extra control over the focus, and you want to tell the camera what to focus on, and this is where the manual spot comes in. It's a point, and you control the actual selection of the point with the back wheel, and the camera will listen to you and focus exactly where that spot is located. Now, there's manual normal, which is the same thing. It's just a bigger area. It's not so small of a point. And the same thing, you move it around the screen and the camera will focus wherever you have it directed. Same concept applies with manual wide. Maybe you're shooting a larger group of people. You don't want the area to be so small. You use that. Now, this is all manually controlled by you. If you want the camera to do some calculations, try subject tracking. And the way that works is you find your subject, you hit the OK button to start the process, and now the camera will try and lock on to whatever subject you pick. And you can see here, it does a pretty good job, except if you move the camera fast, oops, it lost it. So you got to not move the camera too jarringly. It's not perfect. So therefore, this is not going to work too well like in a sports situation or something with fast motion. But let's try it again here, moving the camera relatively slowly. Sometimes the subject will be moving and not the camera. Either way, it does still do a pretty good job tracking it if the movement is relatively controlled. And hitting the OK button stops the process. Now, the final selection in the menu is target finding autofocus. If you're shooting in auto mode, the camera defaults to this mode. It will look for a subject. It'll actually try to find a face, but if not, it will pick something usually in the center of the frame where it thinks that is the subject. You can see it's sort of all over the place. This mode is okay for sort of general casual shooting, but if there's really something specific you want to focus on to make sure it's in focus, you're better off with one of the manual modes, like one of those spot modes where you can control the focus point. I just want you to understand those modes work for photo mode and are not applicable in video mode. Now, autofocus mode does work for both photos and video. AFS is more suited for photos. The camera will only focus, and you can see the little box goes green when you half press the shutter down. It's not doing anything when you're just pointing the camera, as opposed to AFF, which is full-time autofocus. The camera is constantly focusing. You see, you notice the difference? The man's face is in focus even when the shutter isn't pressed. It uses more battery that way, however. But if you shoot a lot of video, AFF is the way to go. Just carry extra batteries. Now, there are times you really want to use manual focus, and the little switch is right at the back of the camera, easy to change from autofocus to manual. Sometimes the camera just struggles and you have to manually control the focus, especially at high zooms. But before I get into that, I want to talk to you about something real important when shooting video. This AEL AFL button on the back of the camera. In the menu, you can designate that to be an autofocus lock button, an exposure lock, or a combination. I personally choose an autofocus lock because that's really what I need it for. And another way to access it, as shown by the LCD screen, is prompting you, if you want to lock your focus, hit the round wheel on the back of the camera one notch to the left, and it will lock in your focus. And that is so helpful because the camera's biggest problem at long zooms is that it hunts. It doesn't just lock on the subject, as you can see from this example here. But in this shot, the autofocus lock was engaged and it's staying focused directly on her. It's not choosing to focus on something else like the street poles or the signs, which it normally would do if it wasn't locked. But there's going to be situations in photo and video where you'll have to actively manage the focus, in which case you'll need manual focus. Unlike the P1000, where the focus ring is on the front of the camera, in the 950, it's a little knurled wheel on the left-hand side. It's still okay to use, it's just a lot different. In the front, it does nothing. That's just a grip. But just so you know, when you're not in manual focus mode, that knurled ring, you can assign any different function you want in the menu, so it's not wasted, which is smart. Now, when you're in manual focus mode, it gets kind of confusing. There's a lot of numbers and depictions and graphs on screen. So as you change the focus, notice on the right, there's that line that goes up towards infinity or towards the flower as you move the focus, which is giving you a graphical representation. As that bar moves towards that green flower, it means actually you're in macro mode and you're focusing too close. But this just gives you an idea of which direction you're focusing in, further away or closer to the lens. So when in manual focus mode, it'll use something called Focus Assist by magnifying the image to help you focus clearer. Right now it's at 1x, but the arrow on the 2x means it will go into doubling the size when you hit the control wheel to the left. So after you hit the control wheel, it'll be double in size. If you move the wheel to the right, it'll jump back to autofocus. And if you move the wheel down, it'll go back to 1x. So just to show you live, I'll click the control wheel to the left, and now the image is magnified 2x. If I click the control wheel to the left again, now it'll be 4x. And if I click the control wheel to the left again, it'll be 1x, and so on. It basically is telling you what's going to happen next after you click the wheel. I know it's a little confusing to get used to, but once you get the hang of it, it becomes easier. And just understand, the magnification is just a focus assist tool. It's not actually magnifying the image. It won't actually shoot it that way. It's just zooming in on the image for you to focus. Another focus assist tool is called peaking, and you can either turn this on or off, but some people like it as it helps you actually see what's in focus besides the clarity of the image. The numbers on the left is the level of peaking, the degree of it, but I keep it on 3, so those white sparkly lines will tell you what part of the image is in focus. Now, you could use manual focus when you're in macro mode or shooting really up close, but another way to do it is to hit that flower button on the bottom of the wheel and engage the macro mode, which is the actual flower icon in the menu, and you can shoot really up close, and you can zoom in a little bit as well. The camera gives you that flexibility. When you are in full wide, you could be 0.4 inches or 1 centimeter from the lens, and that jumps to 16 feet 5 inches in full telephoto mode. But the macro capability is really interesting on this camera. You can really get up close and personal with this unit. I'm not sure I recommend doing this type of experiment with a living subject. That's why it's good to have a dead guy around so you can really get into his face. But this really showcases how close you can really get. You have to try and keep the camera steady, and as you get into the subject, the light diminishes, so you may go into higher ISO levels. But wow,
that's pretty close.
It sure is. I really do hope that in the next version of this camera, whenever Nikon releases it, that they do upgrade the autofocus system to a more modern system like the phase detect system, which other mirrorless cameras use. It really would make using that long zoom easier, and give better results. But we can only hope, right? Thanks very much for watching, and please do check out my other tutorial videos on this camera. There's a lot to learn. I will see you in the next video.